For 100 days in 1815, the world watched in disbelief as Napoleon Bonaparte, once exiled in disgrace, returned to reclaim his empire. With a single step onto French soil, he reignited a political firestorm that shook Europe to its core. Soldiers defected, kings panicked, armies marched. This is the story of an exiled emperor's dramatic return, and a battle that would decide the fate of a continent. A cold beach, a small boat, a man once crowned emperor returning from exile with barely 1,000 soldiers, and no invitation. When Napoleon Bonaparte stepped ashore in France in 1815, it wasn't one of his epic campaigns. It was a desperate gamble. Napoleon had no formal army, no allies in government, and the full weight of Europe poised against him. But what he did have was belief, his own, and soon that of thousands. In just weeks, he marched toward Paris, gathering strength as kings panicked and coalitions formed. What followed was one of the most astonishing comebacks in history, a whirlwind of power, politics, and war that would become known as the 100 Days. But to understand how a man could reclaim an empire with nothing but presence, we have to look back at the rise that made him unstoppable, and the fall that made his return unthinkable. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on the French island of Corsica in 1769. After graduating as an artillery officer from the French Military Academy, he rose quickly through the ranks amidst the upheaval of the French Revolution. The support of revolutionary leaders, including Augustin Robespierre, Napoleon gained command during the Siege of Toulon in 1793, his first major victory. That triumph earned him the trust of the Directorate, and by 1796, Napoleon was commander of the Army of Italy. His campaign across northern Italy saw swift victories against the Austrians, pushing them out of Lombardy. In early 1797, he forced Austria into a peace settlement and dismantled the centuries-old Republic of Venice. In 1798, Napoleon led a military expedition to Egypt aimed at undercutting British power and inciting anti-British resistance in India. Though ultimately unsuccessful militarily, particularly with the defeat at Alexandria in 1801, this campaign sparked a European fascination with Egypt. It also helped bolster Napoleon's reputation in France. So back home, Napoleon remained a national hero. He leveraged his popularity and political connections to stage the coup of the 18th Brumaire in 1799, toppling the Directory and installing himself as first consul under a new constitution. Between 1799 and 1804, Napoleon radically restructured France. His Napoleonic Code helped modernize French law by consolidating existing legal codes into a unified system. Napoleon centralized administration, reformed education, and positioned himself as the keystone of a new national identity. In 1804, Napoleon crowned himself emperor in a dramatic ceremony at Notre Dame, famously taking the crown from the Pope's hands and placing it on his own head, an act that showed he owed his power to no one. Through a series of campaigns now known as the Napoleonic Wars, as emperor, Napoleon expanded French influence across Europe. His decisive victory at Austerlitz solidified his dominance, paving the way for the formation of the Confederation of the Rhine. But in 1812, his luck turned. The disastrous invasion of Russia and a crushing loss at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813 signaled his decline. By 1814, coalition forces began entering Paris. Napoleon abdicated his throne and was exiled to the island of Elba. Isolated and restless, he kept a watchful eye on events in France, walking daily among his small entourage and all the while plotting his return. From Elba, Napoleon never stopped watching. He kept waiting, and when the moment came, the exiled emperor finally acted. Not as a man defeated, but as one determined to rewrite his own ending. Meanwhile, the Congress of Vienna met to redraw the map of Europe and reinstate the monarchies toppled by Napoleon's wars. In In France, King Louis XVIII took the throne, but Napoleon, ever watching, saw that the return of the Bourbons was proving unpopular. France was still restless. Sensing opportunity, Napoleon escaped Elba with 1,000 loyal men on February 26, 1815. 2 days later, his boat landed on the shores of France's Côte d'Azur. And within just 4 more days, the new French monarchy knew that Napoleon was back. What followed was a whirlwind of decisions, battles, and betrayals, a period of time now known as Napoleon's 100 Days. It all began on March 7th. The 5th Regiment intercepted Napoleon near Grenoble. Napoleon had approached the army alone, boldly declaring, "Here I am, kill your emperor if you wish." At first, rifles were raised, but then someone shouted, "Long live the emperor." Grenoble opened its gates, and the story of Napoleon's daring return continued to spread. On March 13th, at the Congress of Vienna, the Allied powers, Britain, Russia, Austria, and Prussia, declared Napoleon an outlaw and began mobilizing their forces. Napoleon was denounced as an enemy of mankind and stripped of all legal protections. The 7th Coalition was born, uniting the major European powers in a renewed military alliance against him. On March 14th, Marshal Michel Ney, once Napoleon's ally and now pledged to King Louis XVIII, famously vowed to capture the exiled emperor in an iron cage. But in reality, Ney was torn. After all, Napoleon had once called Ney the bravest of the brave. When Ney finally faced Napoleon again, memories and loyalty overwhelmed him. Ney returned to Napoleon's side, bringing with him some 6,000 troops. Word of Napoleon's advances continued to spread. One message sent to the royal palace read, "From Napoleon to Louis XVIII. My dear brother, it is not necessary to send me more troops. I already have enough of them." On March 20th, Napoleon entered Paris without resistance. His promises of constitutional reform and elections had found receptive ears. Crowds lined the streets, cheering his return as church bells rang across the city. Benjamin Constant, a prominent political thinker who had once opposed the emperor, helped Napoleon craft a new constitution that balanced imperial authority with civil liberties. This document introduced an elected Chamber of Representatives and guaranteed press freedom, though Napoleon retained significant executive control. For Constant, working with Napoleon was a bitter compromise, one he justified with the hope of steering France toward a more liberal future. Meanwhile, Louis XVIII, unpopular and thoroughly disconnected from France's revolutionary ideals, fled to Belgium. On March 25th, the Congress of Vienna, struggling to unify, collapsed. Meanwhile, however, the 7th Coalition formally allied, planning to converge from multiple directions and crush Napoleon before he could solidify power. By April 8th, despite achieving some successes and support, Napoleon was still struggling to raise a force large enough to actually challenge the coalition. The Allied forces had mustered 200,000 men. Napoleon's army, a patchwork of old soldiers and green recruits, numbered 75,000, and by now it was suffering from supply shortages and hasty preparation. Knowing that he could not defeat all the Allied forces at once, Napoleon planned preemptive strikes to divide and conquer them. His strategy depended on speed and surprise to catch the Allies before they could fully unite. Back in 1808, Napoleon had declared his brother-in-law, Joachim Murat, King of Naples. Murat had made an agreement with Austria in 1813 following Napoleon's defeat in order to remain on the throne. But by May of 1815, Murat's alliance with Austria had broken down. Hoping to defend his throne, Murat backed Italian independence and declared war on Austria. His army was defeated at Tolentino. Murat's failure removed a potential ally from the southern front, further isolating Napoleon. Nevertheless, Napoleon prepared his fledgling army to invade Belgium, where British and Prussian forces were already waiting. On June 1st, the French populace officially adopted Napoleon's new constitution. Though voter turnout was low, the act symbolized Napoleon's attempt to legitimize his return with reforms aimed at curbing absolute power. Many supported the reforms in principle, but the looming war tempered their enthusiasm. On June 16th, at the Battle of Ligny, Napoleon defeated the Prussians under Field Marshal Blücher, but at Quatre Bras, his troops clashed with the Duke of Wellington's allied forces. The outcome of the battle was unclear, and casualties were heavy, especially for France. Napoleon's failure to stop the allied armies from uniting would soon prove critical. Then came the infamous Battle of Waterloo. On June 18th, overnight rain had turned the ground to mud, delaying Napoleon's initial attacks and bogging down artillery. He faced Wellington's army, which was soon reinforced by the recovering Prussians. As French forces wavered, the elite Imperial Guard advanced. But even they faltered. Panic rippled through the lines. The army broke. France lost 40,000 men. Waterloo ended any chance Napoleon had of maintaining his grip on power. The battle-weary former emperor returned to Paris on June 21st. All of France was exhausted too. Napoleon's political capital was finally depleted. Support in the legislature dwindled, and confidence in his ability to continue the fight all but evaporated. On June 22nd, Napoleon abdicated the throne, again, naming his son as successor. But this plan quickly dissolved. France had finally lost its appetite for a Bonapartist continuation, and so had the rest of Europe. On July 7th, the coalition forces entered Paris. The capital once again changed hands without a fight. On July 8th, Louis XVIII reclaimed the throne. Napoleon's 100 Days had come to an end. But Napoleon's story did not end here. He made plans to sail to America under an alias, but the British Royal Navy intercepted him. He was sent into exile once more, this time to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. He remained there until his death on May 5, 1821, at the age of 51. Napoleon's 100 Days were a final, furious gasp of ambition, a brief return that reshuffled and reshaped not just France, but all of Europe. While Napoleon failed to reclaim his empire, he did succeed in demonstrating the enduring force of personal charisma and political vision. In response to Napoleon's 100 Days, the Congress of Vienna reinforced a balance of power system that impacted European diplomacy for decades. Though Napoleon's reign ended in defeat, his story still endures, an epic tale of how one man's will could challenge the course of history again and again.